Welcome to the Quarter Life Lessons podcast,
a show on the relatable lessons learned on the journey to and through adulthood. I'm Stephanie.
And I'm CharLea. Let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome to the first video Quarter Life Lessons podcast episode. We are so excited to have you here. Today is a little bit different for a couple of reasons. One, because of the video. We're trying out a new app, so please comment on how the quality is. And if you're joining us from YouTube, how the YouTube video quality is. If you guys like the video aspect of the podcast, go ahead and comment right there under the YouTube video or join us on our Instagram. And yeah, today we're just doing a check-in. And we're going to give you a few jewels and lessons that we've learned. It's been about 8 months since we first started collaborating and 4 months since the podcast launched, which blows my mind. But you know, what has the beginning of this journey taught you?
Yeah, it was such an exciting thing to start learning and giving ourselves permission to explore this opportunity. And I think as we went ahead and planned episodes and did the research, even held a launch party, and started looking at the outputs and outcomes of our first episodes, I think the first thing that came to me on what have I learned is don't let yourself get disappointed by the ramp up of the outcomes, if you will. So, we didn't have a lot of early on listeners. We had one episode, and I don't know if I was just so eager. I thought we'd have hundreds of listeners right away, but that's not really the point of this. Like, we are kind of establishing a community. We have amazing listeners who will message us or reach out to us in person, who are supporters of ours and say how much they enjoy episodes or how much a concept we shared was exactly what they needed to hear. And I think prioritizing some of the qualitative feedback that we've received from our amazing listeners instead of just how many streams did we get. So don't let that disappoint you. We are exploring, and we should be taking a bit of an inventory of all sides of the outcomes of this work.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I know that I think it was probably around the end of May where I felt like I started losing steam. Um, I had to go back and remember, why did this even start in the first place? And it's, of course, because of those original audio journaling that I was doing personally. So I just had to think that, yes, this is something that I want a lot of people to be exposed to, and I'd love for a lot of people to hear what we have to say because it's good stuff, I think. But at the end of the day, this is very therapeutic for me. So I'm going to try to continue to come as authentic as we can, and no matter what the outcome is, just keep going because it's something that I want to do and that Stephanie is interested in doing. And it's been fun. It's been a fun.
It's been so fun.
Yeah, it's just been. I don't know if this is what I pictured, but it's definitely much better than I imagined. I think I had started limiting my beliefs at first, just because again of that fear of failure if I put my goals up too high, if I had too much of an ambitious goal. But this is, I think, much better than what I had imagined, especially in the first place. So honestly, all we're missing, which really is the massive amount of listeners that are hopefully to come in the future.
Right. So everybody tell your friends about the Quarter Life Lessons podcast.
Yes.
Awesome. Was there any other takeaways so far? I know we have quite a few we want to talk about today.
Just that it's also quite a bit of work. I would say, especially with the social media aspect, added on to the editing, added on to the content writing, added on to the filming or taking pictures for the social media. It can be a lot, and I just had to realize that I can either make this work for me and make it into a schedule that is attainable, or I can back up on the goal. And I didn't want to back up too much. We did end up adapting and going to just the monthly episodes for now. You know, that could change in the future too. It could go to more, but I think that learning that it was okay to adapt. It is okay to make changes. And, you know, whether there's a huge audience or not, this has to be something that works for me and for Stephanie. And I think that's a very good step in the right direction, because in the past, I don't know that I would have had the strength to make decisions that may not have necessarily been the decision that everybody else would make, or just be worried about what that outcome is in general.
Gosh, Charlie, when you think back to some of our other episodes, I think when you use the word strength right there, you didn't know you had the strength or that you'd be able to use the strength to make the decision that worked best for you. It makes me think of some of the growth that you and I have shared in this podcast on some of our episodes about people pleasing and perfectionism and, showing up. And I'm so happy that you used that word in your takeaway, that we used strength when we made decisions that changed the approach to the podcast so that it could still be a part of our lives. It wasn't some negative, shameful thing. It was actually choices we made out of strength and prioritizing ourselves
Right.
to still be a part of this journey and still hold space for these great conversations. So good job. I agree with you.
Yes, good job to you too. And you know, it's been amazing, as usual, working with Stephanie. Stephanie's not a hard person to work with, so I think she makes it easy. Yes. Were there any other takeaways for you, or what's new?
Yeah, I really loved our launch that we did back in April of 2024. And I remember saying this to the group of friends and family who came to support us. But this entire process has been so transformative for me to give myself permission to be a beginner. And you mentioned all the work that has gone into the podcast. And that's not just, like you mentioned, a lot of really big things that create so much work. It's also thinking through, well, which app should I use? Which platform should we be on? Where are people going to find us? And a lot of the like research and development that happens behind the scenes, market research, understanding the costs, understanding the platforms and the tools. So, to be a beginner, you have a learning curve, and here we are 8 months into this learning curve, and I really have learned so much and really enjoyed it. So anyone that's interested in taking on something as a beginner, don't be dismayed by the learning curve and the mistakes you're going to make in the beginning, because you're going to look back and see that they were really great mistakes. They really taught you a lot. The time you invested in them is going to be priceless.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What about you? What else do we have to share?
I think just more about what I've learned overall in 2024. There's definitely been, even with the podcast and in other spaces, I've really just been learning the impact that my words have. Because again, another large reason of why I wanted to make the podcast and make something that I have to speak up in was working on that wound through therapy and, you know, all the personal journey of that my words don't matter, or my words don't have as much as an effect in a conversation. And so I was the listener for a really long time, which is not bad. It's just that I also have words to contribute that are very powerful, and you know, they have meaning, and I think that they have been very beneficial and effective in a lot of people's lives. If I don't know if I've shared that on my intro episode, but I am in the process of becoming a therapist. So working with different people and in different rooms and different situations, like the last, I'd say, year and a half, I really have been about my words. So that's been a positive and a negative. There's been some space where I'm learning just how impactful my words are in a negative way. And that being with, you know, friendships or different relationships or workplace situations. There is a lot that can go wrong, and I have to be careful just as much. At the same time, I also need to remember that I can put strength behind those words, and it can also be strength in a negative way.
Yeah, wow, that's so amazing. I think you're learning so much in your program, and the way that you want to give back to the world is so inspiring and gracious and beautiful. And it's been wonderful to see your thoughts come through this podcast, things that you've taught me and you've taught our listeners, and things you've taught yourself, probably, because, like I said, we've been giving ourselves permission to do that in this process. And it really has been amazing. And you, Charlie, you have an amazing voice and amazing things to share with people. And I feel so lucky to be your partner in this. And I feel lucky for our listeners and lucky for your future patients, to be able to work with you. You're going to do amazing things for people. You already have.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Steph. That means a lot. I appreciate that.
Yeah. One of the other things that, and we kind of talked about it a little bit, but when you started school this semester or last semester, and I had just come out of a medical transition of my own, we had to pivot. We had built up this library, if you will, of content, and
Yeah.
that kind of didn't go the way that we thought, and we had to change our expectations of ourselves to drop down to one episode a month. We were still able to do some amazing stuff over the summer, but we made that pivot. And what that taught me was that it's okay to take space when you need a break. And that one of the most important things in that process was to communicate to you, when I couldn't do, when I wasn't able to put my energy into our podcast, I needed that energy somewhere else. And you were so kind. And it was such a great experience, someone who's a perfectionist or a people pleaser who really wants to achieve. And obviously, this podcast is really important to me too. I didn't want to have to put my energy somewhere else, but I needed to. So wrestling with that myself, but then to be able to communicate it to you. And I remember you said, thanks so much for telling me what you needed, and at one time in the process. And I just thought, what a wonderful way to absolve somebody from any guilt that they have for not being able to show up. And I want to be that kind of a friend in my life. So I wanted to tell our listeners that it is such an amazing thing to appreciate someone for telling you what they need. And that was a lesson I took away from our summer transition.
Steph, that's so sweet. I'm glad that you were able to have this space, and I think that working together, we have built an environment where it is okay to take that space. I Another one of the larger lessons that I've learned this year is I have a mantra that I say a lot when reading or practicing meditation or anything, and it starts with that I'm the guardian of my energy and my boundaries. And I think this year I really started to put action to that. So to see you do that and be comfortable taking that space and saying the things that you need was really inspiring for me as well. And I think that again, just learning that it's not just saying or setting the boundaries, like you have to make moves behind those boundaries,
Mm.
and you have to make moves and understanding like what is too much energy, where do I get annoyed, noticing like where am I uncomfortable and speaking up about it, or removing yourself, or again having that conversation to make the environment different, and learning where you do fit or where you don't fit, and it's okay if you don't fit in certain spaces, because I am a large believer in that those spaces aren't for you, or there's a lot of spaces I don't fit in because I just have a larger energy, and I'm learning that, and that's absolutely okay.
Yeah, and I'm doing so much work too on trying to not avoid or hide, the way that I'm feeling with anxiety or with guilt or people pleasing, and so much to learn right now at 39 years old. I'm excited about it. Certainly the negativity creeps in, but I am excited about it because you're better today than you were yesterday. And the point I wanted to make there is that an example for us this summer when we both needed to make a change in our energy and where we focused. It was in such a healthy way that I didn't let the guilt or the worry of how you might take that come in. And I think that builds your resilience, right? A positive experience around we were able to make a shift, but still stay true to the desires we have for this project. And I'm proud of us, and I'm proud of our show, and I want to share that with the listeners.
Yeah, I agree. And you made a good point about taking breaks. Again, former episodes on rest and recovery, like what would you say since having those kind of breakthrough conversations, what has changed?
Since our episodes, yeah, just, you know, you said a minute ago, you're the guardian of your boundaries and that boundaries require action sometimes too. And I think for me, I'm such an external processor, which all of the listeners know I say in almost every episode, but that what does it mean to not externally process? And what does it mean to just take a self inventory of the feelings and slow down and not over intellectualize? And I think in some cases, this podcast has allowed me a platform to over intellectualize, but it's also given me the space and the action back to me to say, what are you really feeling? Don't just start speaking without thinking. So I know that's kind of a run on thought, but that's something that I want to do more of. And it's a gift I needed at this stage in my life.
Yeah. And I like that you said it is a gift. It's a gift and it's a skill. It's something that has to be learned and worked on and worked through. Just simply having enough grace with yourself and patience to take a break. And also, changing the way we do things on the podcast is kind of like public. That's very much so um, exposed, or it feels exposed when we have to change things from the original plan. So that's very brave of us, to work together and make those small changes. And another larger lesson that I've learned over the last year ish is I don't have that much patience with myself and let alone with others. So I'm again growing that intentionality and also trying to work on where is that coming from? Like, why am I so short to want to move on to the next thing? And, just learning to, again, grow that skill of having patience. Especially with myself. And, that's why I say it's hard to give yourself that little bit of grace because, again, when you set an expectation, I try to be, a woman of my word as much as possible. And I feel like it can be like defeating, but also like I don't want to disappoint me. Like there's enough disappointments in the world. I don't want to be the one to do it. But at the same time, there's a balance of having that patience. And I think patience also ties back into the energy and what is something that I'm just not having enough patience for and what is something that I simply don't like and that I don't want to be around. So I think that this year has brought up a lot of examples of where I can learn to decipher the difference.
Yeah, that's amazing. What a great skill to develop, in your mid 20s for sure. I think an energy inventory and what can I do to mitigate this or that? Patience with yourself, grace. Those are all such great things to take away from this. Okay, CharLea, that kind of sums up our lessons from the start of the podcast. But what I'm really excited about is what are some content ideas that you have going into the next 8 months of the podcast?
Oh man. Well, Stephanie introduced this software, this app to me, so that kind of opens up quite a few options. There's a very long list of interviews that we have been waiting to get to. We just, can't invite everybody into my little apartment to record. So I'll let that list remain a surprise for now, as we gather the resources and the people to do those interviews. But I am excited to eventually touch on grief. Um, as most of you know, with the very, very first ad we ever released, I did lose my aunt in the beginning of this year. And that was another huge lesson that I know some people are struggling with because it knocked me on my butt, that's for sure. So, grief for sure is one of them. And, if I had to say another, I think I'm gaining enough skills to speak about nutrition and what I've learned from being in eating disorder treatment and just that process of, what my life looks like now, the things that comes with being in recovery and changing. Yes, but what about you, Steph?
Yeah, let's see. There's been so much for me this year too. I can't wait to do the ones about nutrition and just kind of coping skills around eating. I'm excited to uncover if I feel capable of uncovering some of the stuff I'm exploring around anxious attachment and over intellectualizing. Um, Possibly some things with experts in these fields. I know there are other kind of adulting 101 and coming to terms with being an adult type of episodes that we've talked about, but I'm really excited to just share my own growth with the listeners and to see your growth as well. I think it's going to be a great next 8 months, and hopefully people are so pleased and growing right along with us.
As always, the conversation does not end here.
We want to know your thoughts on these topics. Join us on Instagram at Quarter Life Lessons Pod to share your perspectives and continue the conversation to thrive.
Thank you for tuning in to the Quarter Life Lessons podcast. Find new episodes on Spotify, YouTube, and our Buzzsprout website.